I've been having some interesting conversations with some of the Foolish Fish members on the Discord chat channel about the big cosmic event that everyone's talking about right now. You probably know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the great conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn appearing in the same spot in the sky on December 21st of 2020. I've also been spending a bit of time scouring the internet for opinions on what might be significant about this event, particularly in these early days of this new age of Aquarius. So, yeah, if I've lost you already, then I don't blame you. There's quite a bit of jargon to pack in at the beginning of a video. I think there is, nevertheless, material for everyone in this topic. You might have to do your own picking out of what seems interesting to you. What's undeniable is that this is a transitional period, and that affects everyone, without exception. So, yeah, here are my thoughts on the whole thing. First of all, I find it fascinating that this great conjunction is happening exactly at the same time as the winter solstice, the time when the nights are longest and the days are shortest. And while that might sound bleak, we mustn't forget what this also means, that it's the point when the tide switches, the end of the out-breath. It's also the beginning of the in-breath. So a very interesting time of the year. And it's also the time of what in the Roman Empire were known as the Saturnalia. I recommend checking out the Theomagica blog post by Frater Acher on this topic, where he describes how the Saturnalia was a time of the year between the 17th and 22nd of December, so just before the birthday of Sol Invictus, the unconquerable sun. I'll leave a link in the description, of course, so that you can read the fascinating details, but in short, Frater Acher describes the Saturnalia as a time when social norms and statuses were reversed. The lowly were allowed behaviours and activities only normally allowed to the rich, like gambling and so on. People wore masks to hide their identity and therefore social standing. And most significantly, all property would become public, just for those few days, which of course was great for the have-nots, but I imagine must have left a good number of haves with sleepless nights. So, it's agreed that this time of year is anyway, by default, associated with shifts, transfers of power from what was to what will be. But this year, the basic associations of this time are further compounded by this conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. Now, if you've already got your feet wet with astrology and you know why anyone would care about those two planets being in the same spot in the sky at the same time, then you might want to just fast forward for a few minutes. I'm not going to teach you anything new, but for the rest of us, let me just take a moment to explore what this celestial event sounds like to an occultist who thinks of the material world as a manifestation of the spiritual world. Right, as above, so below, and for whom the cycles that can be seen in the stars and planets are actually signs to be interpreted. A conjunction in astrology will usually be a time when the powers of the one planet will be attributed to the other, and a combined effect is what we can expect. So Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of growth, of abundance, of exuberance, of having the upper hand and things going your way. It's the planet of success. Saturn, on the other hand, is the planet of austerity, of restraint, of the end part of cycles, of restriction, of strict control, and in its most extreme form, of death. It's also worth pointing out that while Jupiter is often associated with material possession and wealth, Saturn is actually the one of the 7 classical planets associated with the element of Earth, and therefore materialism. This is a very interesting time for people who believe that there is a correlation between astronomical movement, visible subjectively from the Earth, and the tides of fate on Earth for mankind. It's worth stating here that we actually get near conjunctions of these two specific planets every 20 years or so. But the last time they were this close together was in 1623. Before that, 1226, so that's every 397 years, almost 400 years. Now, given these details, there are a number of ways in which we can interpret this conjunction of these two planets, of expansion and of contraction. But just as was the case with the old Saturnalia, moving from one part of the year to the next was seen as a blessing by some and as terrifying for others, This particular conjunction happens at a time that also marks the end of the age of Pisces and the start of the age of Aquarius, and we can assume that that too will be good for some and bad for others. The big question is, who will see the benefits and who will see their downfall? I watched a fascinating video last night by a talented YouTuber with a channel called Uber Boyo. I imagine some of you probably already know this channel. It's got quite a large following. And the object of this video was a presentation of Carl Jung's predictions for this new Aion. Predictions which he actually wrote about in this book, which is actually called Aion. So I haven't read Aion at the time of recording this video, though Christmas is just a few days away. It seems to have miraculously disappeared from my wish list, so yes, there's hope. Anyway, the suggestion that Carl Jung makes, according to Uber Boyo, is that we're coming to the end of an era where our voice of reason, so the voice that steps in when you're about to give in to moments of weakness, and that, well, sometimes you ignore, sometimes you pay attention to. So we're coming to the end of this era when that voice of reason is a spiritual voice, and the dawning of an era where that voice of reason becomes rather the voice of the material world. Now, please don't get me wrong here. I personally think that there's no question that the so-called spiritual institutions have been generating fear in the human population for long enough. And it's high time that our right brain were no longer tyrannized by them. But to equate the so-called spiritual institutions with spirituality is a mistake, in my opinion, and to suggest that no longer paying attention on the one hand to the spiritual guides and then no longer paying attention on the other hand to the dictatorship of organized religions, right, to suggest that those two things are the same thing. I mean, no, they're not the same thing. And yet with the way the institutions have equated themselves with spirituality for so long, the majority of the human race won't see the baby being thrown out with the bathwater, so to speak. We will eradicate the oppressive religious structures, but we run the risk also of throwing out our spiritual inner guides. As a whole human race, I mean, naturally, there will be some exceptions, right? So I can imagine that many of you right now are shouting at your screens, "Foolish fish, what the heck are you talking about? I may reject formal religious structures, but my spiritual guides are not going anywhere." Well, this is where part 2 comes in. Sure, part 1 is the disappearance of the spiritual inner voice of reason, but it's due to part 2, the arisal of a material voice of reason to take its place. And yeah, this Uber Boyo chap, he sees the social credit system in China being a prime example of how that has started to happen already. For those of you who don't know, in China there's a system that's been put in place whereby every individual gets a rating for how good a citizen they are, and for every action that they're seen taking that is beneficial for themselves and the collective, they improve that score. It all works through social media. But when they do things that are considered bad for themselves or society, then their score drops. The big question is, who gets to decide what's good and what's bad? A centralized committee. Now, why would someone agree to play by these new rules? Well, there's the fact that the reward is entirely material. It becomes easier to get financial credit, to get a good house, to get a good job, and so on. But the punishments, so to speak, are also material. If you don't pay attention to this new material voice of reason that the rest of the world is listening to, then you're as good as exiled, without the ability to access the benefits and comforts that are afforded to the rest of society. And it's undeniable that as a whole, the human race cares not just a little bit more, but way more about material comforts and status than we did, say, even just 200 years ago. The Industrial Revolution saw the beginning of that. Now, naturally, also, this is when the ascetics in the world will start crying, "This won't happen to me," or worse, "It's all the fault of the material world." My view, as you know, is that a healthy balance is necessary. That we wouldn't be getting this kickback from the material world if the material world hadn't been so maligned and so repressed for so long. So where am I going with my message here? Well, my message is that forewarned is forearmed, and that if we think that this new zeitgeist won't affect us, we're probably fooling ourselves. I'll mention Uber Boyo's video one last time to say that he suggests that the right brain voices that you listen to most are the ones that get strong and the ones that eventually get the power to steer your behavior. If we can assume that this materialist, man-made AI voice of the material realm is what will, by default, be getting the strongest over the next 397 years, we can take precautions to increase the volume on other voices, the ones we care about, the ones that are in line with our actual core values, so that they don't get drowned out in the meantime. I'll repeat that 2,000 years of unbalance in one direction does not make unbalance in the opposite direction any healthier. And the magician's stance that places the material and the spiritual worlds on an equal platform of importance, to my mind, it's a healthy one going forward. I hope you found the video interesting, even a little bit useful. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch. Don't forget to like the video, to subscribe if you haven't already. I'd like to say a heartfelt thanks to all the Foolish Fish members who contribute so kindly every month for their incredibly edifying conversations on the members-only Discord channel. If you're interested in what that means to be a member, you can click the join button next to the subscribe button to find out more. Thanks in particular to all the level 3 members, the Magister Venerabilis members, being Ian Smith, Osvaldo Gonzalez Nunez, Fernando Martin del Campo, Robert Mahoney, Alvin A, Jason, Frater VPF, Aristarchus, Byron Marmol, W.A., D. Lane, A Million Ways to Wipe, Alexander Carval, Sheridan, Brandon Wilkinson, Andrew Kudlak, Mateusz Sadowski, Chase Lawrence, Mrs. C.Y., Medusa of Chaos, Hilbert Space, Seidr, Matu, Stev Berner, Arcanum Luminarium, Mystic Imagination, Merrily Duffy, Justin Lloyd, Meta Gordy, Oblivion Knight, Rahul Nair, Damnatio Memoria, Suncat, Ted Kaiser, Grillo Alba, Sean Glenn, J. Joseph Safi, Kyle Walker, Roluch Ashron, FMA, Charbon, Patrick, Arcantum by Mr. Friborg, Mr. Gunwich, The Jade Ghost, Miles Ponce, Timothy Owens, SMQAI, and Z. Danielle Barnett. Thanks again everyone for watching. Take care. See you with the next video. Bye bye.